bib assembly wrong side out and the pants right side out, pin the waist edge of the bib assembly to the waist edge of the pants, right sides together, lining up the side seams, notches, and raw edges carefully. Make sure when you're sewing you don't catch the facing in the seam allowance yet. We're now going to flat fell the front portion of the waist seam upwards towards the bib. Trim the seam allowance of the front bib to 1/4 inch, from side seam to the opposite side seam. Be careful to only trim the front bib seam allowance, not all the layers of the waist seam allowance. Make a 1/4 inch clip into the seam allowance on each side of the pants front, right at the edge of the inseam pockets. Press the untrimmed seam allowance up and around the front bib seam allowance, and then press the entire seam allowance up towards the front bib, securing with either Wonder Tape, pins, or glue baste. Top stitch the seam allowance to the bib from side seam to side seam, catching the folded edge of the seam allowance on the center portion, which is being flat felled. Please note that in this video, I am edge stitching from the wrong side to clearly show where the seam is being stitched, but you may want to edge stitch from the right side in order to ensure a neater looking seam on the front. Press the seam allowance of the back waist seam up towards the back bib and trim to 1/4 inch to reduce bulk. On the back bib facing and the front bib facing edge that extends a little past the side seam, fold and press the edge about 1/2 inch under towards the wrong side. I am sort of eyeballing it here just to make sure it lines up very neatly with my waist seam extending just a scant bit past the stitching line so that I can catch it when I stitch in the ditch in the next step. Secure the facing by pinning perpendicular to the facing from the right side or using Wonder Tape. From the right side, stitch in the ditch of the waist seam from the edge of the front bib facing around the back bib to the opposite edge of the front bib facing. Please note that because I am using a high contrast thread for visibility, you can still see my stitching. When you use a thread that matches your fabric, it will be much less visible when you stitch in the ditch. The last two steps for your Otis overalls are to hand stitch down the front facing and then to top stitch the front pocket if you choose to use it, just as you did the back pockets. I hope you enjoyed this sew along and I hope you enjoy your Otis overalls.